Dan the Art Man's Book Reviews, Episode 79, The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. There is a reason for all the hype around this book. I watched the movies with the kids and think they actually did a good job with them, but this first book is amazing. It is told so perfectly from the protagonist's point of view. The author chose an interesting, unorthodox way to write this book in present tense first person, but it gives the book such an immediacy that I think it was the right call for her. She had a lot of writing experience before attempting this book, and it shows. From the highly personal details coming from and about each character that pull you further into the story world and make it that much more authentic, to the very real and well-done emotions of the characters going through unthinkable events, especially for kids and young adults. I think this book is a great example of showing how when anything is done well, it can win you over. Think about it. Who wants to read about kids being thrust into a deadly arena to fight to the death? But when you read this story, the humanity of it comes out so well, and you're right there with the characters, who, for the most part, also find it to be revolting and unjust. I'm also super impressed with how well Suzanne Collins told an incredibly moving and complete story, which is also only the beginning of this epic trilogy. That is not easily done, and she leaves you in a sense of relief as a reader with everything over in one sense, while wanting to eagerly continue with the characters into the next book, which will show you how they will try and figure out life back home after all that has happened and all the intense, life-changing things they've been through. Then there's the whole difference in relationships that has developed that will need to be explored in the next book. I'm trying hard not to give any spoilers here. The book knocks it out of the park on so many levels. It's a good lesson for me to not judge a book by its success or love by an audience very different than me. In this case, young girls who now want to learn how to shoot a bow and arrow. I think it's great they can relate to and love this book, but that doesn't mean an old man like me won't find a ton to love in this book also. It was so well written, and the story so well developed, that this is a story I'd easily recommend to any reader. I can't wait to read the next one. Awesome. So yeah, some of my kids have been getting into reading this book, and I remember hearing a lot of hype about it when it first came out, before it was even a movie, and I started reading it and I thought it was really good, but for whatever reason I never finished it. I'm not sure why. I probably was already reading other books and I just wanted to check it out. I don't know, I hate it when I do that, but my kids have been reading through these books or listening to the audiobooks, which I will say are very well narrated. And then as a family, some of us have been watching those movies together. Some of my kids are still a little too young to see those movies, but most of my kids are older now. And I guess, unlike a book that I read because of all the hype, but ended up not liking, which was Twilight, this book really did live up to the hype. And I actually have a review of Twilight. I read it because everyone and their sister kept telling me about it, because whenever I would be anywhere, like even at the dentist getting my teeth cleaned, they would ask me, oh, what are you interested in, making small talk? And I'd always say, I love to read. And it was funny to me that people who often didn't like reading were just obsessed with these Twilight books. And so, anyway, I could see why they liked those. I could see why the story was engaging and compelling to people. But the writing left a lot to be desired for me. I'm not the target audience, I'll admit that. But I'm really not the target audience for this book either. And yet, I found it to be fantastic, impressive, very well crafted, and just as far as literary, richness goes, I don't know. It's a very high quality book, very well told, very well written. And super hard emotions and crazy stuff the characters are dealing with at a young age as well. The author just made it all come off so authentically. I think it really helped that she chose this first-person present tense, which was super interesting, but just very immediate, like I said, and it just draws you right into the story, right into the character's life in that very moment, and you stay with her until the end. And to tell as big of a story this is eventually, with not only a trilogy, but also a prequel novel that has come out, which I guess, I don't know what that will be written in, maybe third person. That'll be interesting to see. But all that to say, I love reading through books that my kids have just finished or are currently reading through, because it's really fun to talk to them about books and to hear why they like stories. It's kind of hard to get them to talk a lot about things or even things that they like. But with books, it's pretty easy because they're just, they've read it, they liked it, and you start talking to them about it, they'll just open up. It's really fun. And it's kind of fun now that my kids are older for them to be able to go and read the books or listen to them. Some of them were reading them in paperback, some listening to the audiobook, but we can get through the stories much faster than if I were to be reading them out loud, like I have with some books like Charlotte's Web or some Goosebumps books, which was a really fun experience as well. And I still read books out loud to my kids, but now that they're older and can read on their own, it's really fun to almost have like a really loose book club with them. Not really, but also I just love being able to dip into the same worlds and talk about the same things with my kids. So that's a fun, special treat I'll always remember from this stage of my life. So if you've heard a lot about these, or you've only seen the movies, which I've seen all 3 movies and I've only read the first book so far, but I'm going to read the second one soon, I highly recommend you to check this book out. It's not only the main character who is developed well, and I think one of the other reasons I like this book so much is I really like coming-of-age, young adult books that are told in first person or are really close to the narrator, because just that immediacy you get, like you're in their head and you're right there with them, which you can totally achieve with third person, and that's another way that you can tell bigger stories by jumping around to different perspectives. But I don't know, there's just something special to me about a first-person narrative that really pulls me in, and I think helps me keep turning the pages without much effort. Whereas I really appreciate getting to jump to other characters' perspectives in different chapters, and it's a really cool way to tell a story as well, and sometimes maybe the only way you can tell a certain kind of story. I have to admit that sometimes it's a little bit of friction when I have to switch from one character to the other. I'm like, no, I wanted to keep going with what they were telling me. Okay, then I get used to this other one. Oh, now I have to switch back. Some people love that. I don't dislike it, but to me, there's just something special about a first-person narrative. What are your thoughts about the Hunger Games books? You can go to my website, dandantheartman.com, find episode 79 of Dan the Artman's book reviews, and drop a comment so we can continue the discussion there. Until next time, happy reading.
This podcast is brought to you by dandantheartman.com, where you can find more book reviews, entries on Dan's writing journey, and links to purchase Dan's books, like Haunted House Flipper or The Case of the Missing Snowman. Music by Dan Absalonson.